You want a housing payment that doesn't leave you feeling underwater, but with high prices and high interest rates, many people are stretching themselves too thin on their mortgages, ending up house poor. They're forced to change their lifestyles, and some even have to sell to escape that. The problem is that too many buyers look at a home and they think, I can afford that. They cross their fingers thinking it's all going to work out, only to find each month getting tighter and tighter with their monthly payments. What if it gets to be too much? You shouldn't have to guess whether you can handle a mortgage payment. In this video, I'll show you why the current affordability rules fail and how to truly test if a mortgage fits your budget. So, for example, let's look at what happens when people go from renting to buying. In 2024, the average rent was $1,739 per month, but the average mortgage payment soared to $2,700 per month, a 55% increase. And many buyers take on a higher payment without fully understanding how it will impact their day-to-day finances. They're diving in hoping their budget can handle it, but often they end up feeling the squeeze when unexpected expenses or lifestyle costs start piling up. This kind of leap can lead to financial strain, stress, and even regrets, situations that could be avoided with a more realistic look at what you can actually afford. So let's look at why affordability ratios don't work. Debt to income ratios, or DTI, measure how much of your income goes towards paying debts. So lenders rely on debt to income to assess the risk of lending you money, so higher ratios mean higher risk. So while financial experts have tried to use these ratios as a guide to your own affordability, they don't always capture the full picture of your financial situation. So for instance, there's some common ratios where you might see things like people looking at 25% of your net income. That means your take-home pay. Other ratios are going to look at your gross income, meaning before your taxes. So sometimes they might look at 28% as a front-end ratio and 36% as a back-end ratio. So a front end means how much is your future mortgage payment, and the back end is your total. So your future mortgage payment plus anything like auto loans, student loans, and things like that. Other ratios just look at one number and they might look at 43%. So there's all these different ratios all trying to help you get an idea of if you can afford a home. So here's why these aren't the best to rely on solely for understanding your affordability. So lenders use them to assess risk, and others mistakenly use them as a blanket rule for affordability. And the problem here is these ratios focus on things like your pre-tax income. They only consider your debt, ignoring other expenses like retirement savings, utilities, maintenance, and all the other expenses that you have in your life. Plus, there's no solid research behind these ratios. For lenders, they manage risk, and for others, they're really just numbers that feel good to hit. They're not a true reflection of what you can comfortably afford. All the affordability rules aren't based on the real world with your real budget. So then when it comes to budgeting, most people get house budgeting wrong by starting with the house and then they build their budget around that. Instead, we need a more holistic approach before jumping into home ownership. So what you should do is start with your personal goals first and then build a budget around those. You might realize that buying a house isn't even part of your plan right now because there are other priorities you want to tackle first. So one of the things I want you to consider when looking at budgeting and your own affordability is what are the goals that you're actually working towards right now? So for instance, you might be looking at paying off high interest credit card debt. Maybe you want to get a more functional car. You want to save more aggressively for retirement. You want to be able to take on new vacations or invest in a new business. These should all be informing your decisions with buying a house. It's not just buy a house and build everything else around it. This all needs to be considered before you look at how much of a mortgage payment you want to take on when you look at buying a home. And then when you're actually planning out this budget, included in these goals, you actually want to write them down in some way, not just store them up here because it doesn't really work long term. You can't make a lot of plans with all of these numbers up in your head. So what I would suggest is actually looking at some different budgeting tools. And all these budgeting tools make it super easy to auto import your accounts and see everything at a glance. So I personally use Monarch. I think it's fantastic compared to these other tools, but there's tons of other options. Even things as simple as Google Sheets, you can find templates for budgeting online. There's other software like You Need a Budget or Every Dollar as well. Again, I like Monarch the best personally, but you can choose whichever one works best for you. So once you start writing down your budget, either on paper or maybe it's a Google Sheet or you get it imported into an app, you're going to start noticing some trends of the way that you spend money. And I don't think budgeting has to be track every single cent, where it goes and be super granular. I think what budgeting mainly is about is trying to figure out what are the general habits that you have with your money. And is that something you want to continue, or do you need to change, especially if you're looking at buying a house? So you might be starting to ask questions when you look at your budget. Are you saving for retirement? Is 20% of your income going in, or maybe 10% or 15%? How much is actually going towards retirement? And does that meet the goals that you have for retiring in the amount of years it's going to take you to get there? Also, are you doing things like you're eating out too much instead of making food at home? Do you have a lot of impulse spending? Do you have any extra money available to increase things like your down payment? And are there other areas that you can trim, maybe that are extra shopping or different things like that? What you're really trying to look at is what are the trends happening with your budget, and do they actually align with the goals that you set up in the beginning? It's really good to begin writing out, here's exactly what I want to do in my life, here's what it will take to get me there, and then are my current actions actually aligning with what I want to do? And if your budget feels completely off track, start by writing down your personal goals. Then ask yourself, what do you need to actually achieve them? Begin with how much money needs to go towards paying off debt. Then focus on saving at least 15% for investing. You won't feel confident about buying a home unless you feel in control of your money and where it's going. So taking a closer look at your budget might even reveal that it's time to explore new opportunities like changing jobs for a pay increase. Holistic budgeting is about shifting your mindset from this is how badly I spent money this month to this is how well my spending aligns with my goals. Your financial goals should be the priority here, and a house is just one piece of that puzzle, not the main factor driving your entire budget and financial life. So this is the best way to see if a mortgage payment is actually going to make sense in your budget. So what you're going to do is you're going to stress test it with pseudo payments. So this is how this works. So you can use debt to income ratios to get a ballpark idea of what you can afford, but don't rely on it as a final answer. A more practical approach is to actually stress test your potential mortgage payment in the real world. So start by comparing it to what you currently pay in rent. This is often a really good indicator if a mortgage payment is going to be comfortable for you, right? If your rent payment is manageable now, a similar or slightly higher payment might be fine. However, if your rent already stretches your budget, it's a clear sign that increasing your housing payment through a mortgage might not be a wise move, or even if your mortgage payment is the same as your current rental payment that's already tough, it's probably not going to be a wise move either, because taxes and insurance can increase after you buy a home, so your mortgage payment could increase after you purchase. So the way that pseudo payments work here is we're basically going to act like we're making a higher mortgage payment, or that target mortgage payment you want to hit, to see if it's actually going to work inside of your budget. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through all the steps to be able to do this. It's really not as difficult as it might seem. So first, you're only going to do this if a rent payment is comfortable for you right now. If your rent payment is already stretching your budget, then I don't think it's wise to go ahead and start moving forward with looking at buying a home yet. I think you probably need to go back to your budget and take a look at, okay, is it possible that either you can get a mortgage payment that's lower than your current rental payment, or maybe there's things that need to change. Either you need to increase your income in some way or decrease your expenses in some way as well. So if your rent payment is already comfortable, if you're comfortable making that payment now, what you want to do then is see the average monthly payment on home search sites. So what you might want to do is go online to Redfin, Realtor.com, Zillow, those types of sites, and start looking at homes that you think would be best for you. So on those sites, you can usually pull up a mortgage calculator, and what you want to do is make sure that you go in and kind of fine tune some of the details in there. Most of them are going to default to 20% down. Maybe your down payment is only going to be 3%, and so you want to fine tune that in there as well and see a general idea of what that monthly payment might be. So you might be looking at homes in your area or the neighborhood you want to buy in and see, okay, the average monthly payment is going to be around $2,000 per month for your mortgage, taxes, and homeowner's insurance. Okay, so you're going to have that written down. Then use your budget in home searching to come up with an ideal mortgage payment. So as you're looking at these homes, you might see, okay, I see everything around, let's say $2,000 per month. Okay, maybe that's something that I can afford, and you're going to have that as your ideal mortgage payment. Okay, you think it's something that can work right now, but maybe you're not 100% certain, and that's what the stress testing is for. Then what you're going to do is you're going to find the difference between your current rent payment and your ideal mortgage payment. Okay, I know in an ideal world there would be $0 per month mortgage, but what you want to do here is, let's say your rental payment right now is $1,200 per month. And your ideal mortgage payment to be able to get the house that you want is, let's say it's $2,000 per month. Okay, there is a $800 per month difference. So if you got a mortgage for that home, you would increase your monthly housing cost by $800 to go from $1,200 to $2,000 per month. Okay, that's going to be what we're going to call the stress test payment. So what I want you to do is set up a separate checking account with your bank. Most banks online, it's really easy to just go in and add a little checking account there. And what I want you to do is I want you to deposit the stress test payment into that separate checking account each month. Okay, so the goal here is basically, your rental payment is $1,200 per month. The ideal mortgage payment that we're trying to stress test is $2,000 per month. What I want you to do is, when you make your rental payment, pay the $1,200 to your landlord or whoever you pay, and then transfer $800 into this separate checking account. So it's as if you were paying $2,000 per month on your housing expense. Okay. Now, ideally, it'd be good for you to do this for at least 3 months to see if this is a good test. Okay. So what you're trying to see is, in the real world, if I actually have to spend $2,000 per month, is that going to change my budget, the actual day-to-day decisions? Because when you're budgeting and doing everything on paper or just as a theory, it's really easy to think that things are going to work, but then real life kind of gets in the way. So what you're trying to see is, if this feels comfortable, then the ideal payment should be fine for your budget. Okay. And again, I know this takes a little bit of time to kind of stress test and see, but this is really one of the best ways to make sure that a payment isn't going to feel overwhelming for you. And if it doesn't feel comfortable, then you need to lower the ideal mortgage payment and revisit your budget. And so if you're in this spot, I wouldn't feel discouraged, because ultimately you found out that, wow, it's really great that you didn't take on a mortgage payment that was that much, because it was actually impacting your real life budget, getting in the way of your goals. And that's what you're trying to see here, right? Even doing this for 1 month is going to give you a good idea of, wow, if I actually spent that extra $800, if I didn't have access to that anymore, how is that going to impact the decisions that I make with my money? Is it going to change, me going out to eat more? Is it going to change me traveling more? Is it going to change the other goals that I have, or saving for retirement? Those types of things. You actually want to see, how is that impacting your real life budget? So when you're thinking about moving from renting to buying home, it's all about getting more realistic with your money. Debt to income ratios are a handy tool to start with, but they don't tell you the whole story. They just look at your income before taxes and your debts, leaving out other big parts of your financial life, like how much you're saving or spending on other necessities. So instead, I want you to try looking at your budget more holistically. This means making sure your spending lines up with what's important to you, whether that's clearing debt, putting money away for retirement, or saving up for vacations or a new business. And if you're comfortable with what you're paying in rent now, then maybe you're ready for a similar or slightly higher mortgage payment. But if you're already feeling like things are tight, taking on a bigger mortgage could really impact your budget a lot. So a smart move, again, is to stress test your budget, simulate a higher housing payment, put the difference between your current rent and the mortgage you might take on in a separate account every month. And this lets you see what it feels like to actually live with that higher payment without the actual commitment of a 30-year mortgage. So if after a few months that extra amount feels okay and doesn't disrupt your other financial plans, then that house payment in that range might be doable. So by taking these steps, you can hit the housing market feeling good about your choices, knowing that you're not just jumping in, but making a move that actually is going to make sense for your budget and the goals that you have.